Did you see Darren Aronofsky's The Whale?
Yes, I did. And I didn't even know it was Darren Aronofsky. It was so funny. I just like everyone was talking about Brendan Fraser. Oh, he's in The Whale. He plays a fat guy. The Whale. Brendan Fraser. Brendan Fraser. I'm like, okay. So I turn it on, and when Darren Aronofsky's name came up, I'm like, oh, nobody even said this to me.
That's good, actually. But were you? I mean, it was a real stretch because he's known for his really unique artistic visual vision of things. And this, of course, famously, it takes place in, essentially this one apartment, a couple of rooms, mostly the living room. And it's an adaptation of a play. I think of the same name. I hadn't heard of it before the movie. It's helpful, I think, to know that you're watching an adaptation of a play, because some of the things that feel a little bit too blocked or a little bit too kind of
the dialogue can be very blunt and theatrical. It's almost hyper real, which I worked in theater for a while, and it kind of felt at home to me. I was like, oh, it felt very play like, and I didn't know it was a play. Or
that's how. Yeah, if you want to go watch and enjoy this movie, I think it's good to know. Like sometimes you like to know, like, oh, this is an adaptation of a book or whatever. It's good to know it's an adaptation of a play.
Yeah, because it's one location basically, and it's staged very much. It reminds me of like The Hateful Eight, where it's kind of like a play like thing, except that's adapting no play. that's just play like.
It's kind of writing it. It's kind of writing it in the first place to be adapted into a play.
Yeah.
I think Disney does that with a lot of their animated movies now for musicals, where it's like Frozen 2 is like ready for Broadway, as soon as you make it. Or what was the other one I saw recently where I was like, this thing is just ready to go? Oh, well, Encanto. Yeah. I mean, Encanto is more ready for Broadway than it was an animated film in the first place. Much like Hateful Eight. So all I had really heard was like Brendan Fraser was incredible. And of course, Brendan Fraser is sort of like a meme actor, right? I mean, he was like a kind of a dubious action star in the 90s and 2000s, but he was in a lot of movies, and
he was in The Mummy. What was that called? Bedazzled or whatever. He Encino Man. He was in that. Man. Yeah, he was big. He was a big star, and then he kind of dropped.
Jungle.
Yeah, he kind of dropped off the face of the planet. And I really don't know anything about him, really. Like, I don't know if he's been struggling with addiction. I don't know if he's doing anything, but he's back, and people like it.
Certainly in this movie he is. And I guess Darren had wanted to make the film for a long time, for a few years anyway, and he was trying to find his vision for the casting was, let's take somebody everybody knows and then reintroduce them. That was his plan. Kind of like he did with Mickey Rourke with The Wrestler.
Right.
For those who don't know what Darren has directed, so he did Pi in 1998, like, fairly famous, but maybe not a lot of people have seen it or heard of it. It was, indie black and white movie made very cheap, like almost a zero budget college thing. But really, that was the movie that he invented that, what do they call it? Like the Steadicam that like is pointed at the subject. So then the subject walks around with the Steadicam on, and the camera follows him. And then he kind of employed a lot of camera techniques in Requiem for a Dream, Jared Leto, Marlon Wayne. When I saw Requiem in the 2000s, like, to me, Requiem for a Dream, it came out in 2000, but it represents indie film of the 2000s, like as much as maybe Donnie Darko or I love Requiem. Certainly at the time I was like, because it was an introduction into like, oh, you could do that, and you could do, and all this visual storytelling and like some comedy that doesn't belong there, but it works ultimately. Like the talk show she was watching, it's a really, really, really inventive, brave, crazy fucking movie. And then he went on to do The Fountain, which I didn't connect with at the time. Hugh Jackman movie. I gotta
revisit that one, because I watched it and I fell asleep. Admittedly, and I like Hugh Jackson. It's a difficult movie. It's very you have to be patient with it. I remember.
Yeah. Then The Wrestler, which I adore.
I haven't seen The Wrestler. I have to.
Oh, that's a good time. Yeah, I mean, if you like character dramas with great acting, and that's just you can't lose there. It's just now occurring to me. So you see a naked Marissa Tomei in that movie, and she looks wonderful. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, wow, like they're really going for like the older woman sexy thing here. But that was in 2008. That was 15 years ago, and she still looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
She looks, Doing great.
It's a me, Mario.
I was gonna say those Italians. They do great. Black Swan. Did you like Black Swan?
Yes, I did. Natalie Portman's great in that. It's a great,
cool movie.
It's shot in 16 millimeter, so it's like a really grungy look to it. It's beautiful.
Yes, The Whale is his first digital film.
What? Really?
Yeah, he's not shot on digital before that.
It looks, I mean, I think it looks like one thing I noticed about the cinematography, since it takes place in one room, it's like it was never dull. It was never like, reusing, a ton of shots or being like, it's always engaged me.
He's one of those directors that works his ass off. I bet you he was like, oh, I'm going to shoot digital. It better fucking look right. And I bet he put the time into it. See, he also did Noah with Russell Crowe. I think that's an awesome movie that not a lot of people have seen, but it's an incredible movie. Definitely worth watching. And then Mother, which nobody liked. It's this Jesus allegory thing with J Law. But I think it's super cool. I think it's like extremely trippy. Did you see it by any chance?
No, I haven't seen it. No.
Yeah, it's not seen by a lot of people. It's really good. And now The Whale. And yeah, definitely. The fat suit and the whole thing is and Brennan's extremely subtle. I mean, it's a pretty complex character.
Yeah.
And the movie, like usual, they could have tried to, for instance, they could have not shown him eating, right?
Right.
But you don't get this big without eating.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the movie.
Yeah, he's like you really feel how difficult it is for him to be living. like his physicality is really good. The way the makeup's really good. The way like the sweat on his shirt is like terrifying.
It made me realize, like, wow. I've heard Brendan Fraser say this, but like, if you put a big giant fat suit on somebody and make them sweaty and tell them to sit in one gross spot, like, you've done half the acting for them.
Yeah.
All they got to do is respond to that.
But and the character is so rich, has so many layers because he's kind of, it's like he's given up on life, but he's really like optimistic about other people.
Yeah,
and so it's a very interesting characterization the way he is, and
he's got kind of a complex. Obviously, he loathes himself. He's living through a tragedy basically, and he understands that it was the tragedy that led to his obesity. But he's disgusted by himself. He'd like for people to be more honest about that. But he's not like super mature about it either. He's like, I just want everybody to be brutally honest about everything, to no end, including his daughter, who's become this really malevolent character that, and there's
but he's like still very optimistic about her. He's like, oh, yeah, I see the good in her. Like, oh, and even like the preacher kid, he's like kind of optimistic about him, even though he's, trying to, shame him for his gayness and stuff like that. Right. He's like, he's a very interesting character in that way.
Yeah.
It's not
I loved do you remember she was like the rich lady from Watchmen, and then she also was like the front of the house staff in the menu?
Yes. The daughter of Ozymandias or whatever, right?
Yes. Yeah, she plays like his best friend basically, and is kind of his home nurse, really the only person he interacts with physically.
Yeah, like his like sister-in-law, quote unquote, because of his partner.
Yeah, and she's like she's an actress to watch. I think she is really, really cool. Oh. I was like in this movie in particular, I was like she's really playing a few notes here.
Yeah.
And I like her in the other stuff too, but she played like higher concept characters in the other stuff.
Yeah.
In this, she's playing a real like I love the bit with the ex-wife. There's some moments in the movie where people show him affection, but the affection is always unhealthy.
Yes. Yeah.
There's just a lot of small ideas and visual cues that clue the audience in, that contradict what we're being told in the story intentionally. It's just smart, man. It's my kind of movie. Kind of movie.
There's a lot to chew on. It's not two-dimensional. It's dramatic, but not cheap. I think it earns everything that it does. So I recommend it completely. It's funny because this is, I just looked at the Rotten Tomatoes and it has a lower critic score, but the audience score is actually pretty high. So it's interesting. I'm interested.
So, what is it that people have an issue with? You hear about the controversies of like, they don't like that they didn't get a real 600-pounder to do this. And I'm like, that would be insane. I mean, just logistically, I don't know how you would shoot with somebody who's in that bad health. I also think, like, for however bad taste you think it is to have somebody play that character, don't you think it's kind of bad taste to be like, let's take the real person and then judge them? Because the movie makes a judgment about the character, because it's a movie and it has an opinion. Maybe
it doesn't jive with a lot of body positivity stuff that might be happening, and
good for this movie for not giving a fuck.
Yeah, it just brutally tells a story, and I think it's all the better for it.
Like, let's see what these top negative comments are. There's nothing consciously sinister about the whale's use of Charlie's eating disorder. The original play was, in fact, written from experience. So I think maybe the author actually had this problem. But Aronofsky's adaptation is cruel, not just to Charlie's character, but to all of them. Do you feel like you were watching a cruel movie?
No, I thought actually, because of Charlie's positivity, like his optimism, even when he is given up, basically, I thought that there's like a lot of like little notes of. I mean, I think Aronofsky he's obsessed with some of these like really depressing, anxiety-inducing death movies, but
all of his stories are about the main character is in crisis and it's marching to their death.
Yeah,
but 5 of the movies are like that.
But I think like with that, there's still like these little notes of hope and little notes of like humanity that really I think elevate it beyond that. So
that's the thing. It's like, especially a movie like this, which it's like, there's commentary about people that live in this situation or that situation, make this decision or that decision. But the best way to approach these kinds of things as an artist, certainly as an actor, you hear actors talk about it all the time, where you're like, I'm not going to play the character as if I have an opinion about the character. I'm going to play the character truthfully. Well, you should direct truthfully too. Where like it's not really about being like, I'm going to sell the idea that obesity is something you shouldn't be, like you can do it that way, or you could just show the guy trying to live and depict him as truthfully as possible. Yeah. I think I really recommend it. It's now on some form of VOD or other, because I was able to, get it.
Yeah, I think it's available if you want to find it.
Whenever we have these conversations about like franchise films or whatever, and we talk about like, oh, there's not a lot of like auteur directors still out there making like impactful. We always say like there's just Tarantino, Nolan, and like Fincher. We always miss Aronofsky for some reason. I would definitely put him in.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. Do people just not like him? I don't know.
I think actually, if you look at that lineup of movies, I think he's, first of all, he is a little on the unlikable side with his scarves and shit. But
making a scarf judgment here.
The next movie is going to be called The Scarf. It's going to be
just covered in scarves. It's like, don't take my scarves away from me.
Death. But I think maybe the movies take a little bit more risk than even the risk-taking movie crowd is willing to go with. Like some of the, like Mother is something else. It's a fucking crazy movie.
I'll have to watch it because I really did enjoy this, and it made me, it made me feel a lot of things. It made me think a lot, and that's what I want out of my movies.
Yeah, right. It also doesn't like go all the way, right? It like stops short so that you can kind of fill it in. And you spend 24 hours afterwards thinking about it.
Yeah.
And wanting to revisit a scene or two. Somebody was, we were talking about Last of Us and somebody was saying like, Joel and Ellie don't seem like they have a lot of chemistry in the show. Somebody else was like, well, that's because the show's only 10 hours and the game was 20 hours. And I was like, guys, you can tell a story about two characters and their connection in like 20 minutes. Like,
even within the show itself, with the prepper there, that was told in 45 minutes. It was beautiful. It told a complete story. It had you got a good idea of it. And then you got back to Joel and Ellie, and it's shit.
Film is incredibly powerful. Like, I mean, you ever see like a Pixar short film, like a 2-minute one, like makes you feel the entire gamut of emotions in 2 minutes, because like a precise enough image can you don't need a lot of dialogue,
right?
If you can craft a meaningful image, and that's what Darren Aronofsky does. He crafts extremely. I remember there's a subplot in Requiem for a Dream where it's the other half of the plot is Ellen Burstyn she's like taking diet pills, so they're all on heroin and she's on diet pills, and he did this. He like made a set with no walls or something, and he did a time lapse of her cleaning the house manically, and then he did like a track of it. And it's like somewhat, I think nowadays that feels like kind of a pedestrian, like, oh yeah, we know that we could do things like that. But I just remember at the time being like, wow, instead of having a scene about how she's, on Adderall, basically, they show this time lapse of the woman cleaning this entire house and then showing us the entire house.
Right.
And the story is told within 30 seconds or it just little, he's really good at concocting ideas. But they're always weird and they're always risky. And
yeah. Oh yeah. It was, yeah. And Brendan Fraser, he deserves all the praise that he's getting. He's it. He's the reason you're watching the movie, really. Yeah.
Everything around it supports him very well, but he's the main effect. Yeah.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.